Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, colleagues. Just going to start by asking Mr. Sternberg to go through a few items with you. Mr. Sternberg.
Thank you, Chair. As this is the first, I'd like to be given time at least as well as account. Can you hear me now? Yeah. Okay, can you hear me now? It's just saying I'm outlining the fire safety issues. We are not expecting a fire alarm, so should one sound, you should proceed to the fire exit. Although there are two exits, one on each side of the room, the one on the right is the primary fire exit. If the alarm sounds, please make your way through the primary exit. You should only use the secondary door if the primary door is compromised in any way. And if that is the case, you should leave by that door and then leave by the side entrance. When you leave the building, you should make your way to the fire assembly point, up the steps in the front car park. For this meeting, Lee Gideon will be the designated fire warden. Use of microphones. For this meeting, we have engaged the services of a sound engineer who has supplied them the mics. That's Tim in the corner. To work well so that everyone in the room can hear, the mic must be used properly. The streaming is also very dependent on proper use of the microphones. Please all members remember to speak directly into the microphones. They are designed for the speaker to be very close and do not work if the speaker is not close. The chair requests that you do not stand when speaking today so that you can get as close to the microphone as possible. Tim will operate the mics and switch them on and off. If you intend to speak, please indicate to him so that he can switch you on. And please don't rustle your papers as noise can be picked up by nearby microphones. How many could hear that? Thank you.
Before we start the official agenda, just wanted to say a few words, because it is with sadness that we all learned of the passing of Councillor Anne Holmes. She represented Pilsley and Moreton Ward since 1991 and served as chair of the council from 2010 to 2011 and again from 2015 to 2016. During her time in office, Anne supported Help for Heroes and North Derbyshire Stroke Support Group. Anne was also a former member of Pilsley Parish Council and for a time the vice chair. She was an unassuming person who had a reputation in her community for caring for others. On behalf of the council, I convey our sincere sympathies to her family and friends. And I ask colleagues to join me in silence as we remember Councillor Holmes. Thank you. I am going to invite the leader of the Labour group to say a few words.
Thank you, Chair. That's me. That was Joe. So, thanks, Martin and Chair, for those kind words. And like you've said, Anne had been a district councillor for a long while. And I maintain that people become councillors for a variety of reasons, and I reckon the majority of us, on both sides, on all sides, get involved because they want to help their local communities. And I think Anne was a perfect example of that. She never had any aspirations to be an MP or even to be leader of our group. I don't think so, anyway. It's no coincidence that the people of Pilsley and Morton continue to vote for Anne. The people in that area know if someone is genuine or not, and their main priority was representing the people of Pilsley and Morton. More Pilsley, to be honest, I suppose. But to conclude, I think we can all agree Anne was a selfless woman with her heart in the right place, who did all she could to make Pilsley and Morton a better place for the people who lived and worked there. On behalf of the Labour Group, I'd like to pass on our condolences to her family and recognise the work Anne did as a councillor, both at the district and the parish. So thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Barker. And Councillor Cooper.
And thank you. Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to echo the thoughts that's already been spoken. Obviously, I've known Anne for many years, and I've always admired a desire to make things better for local people, particularly in the Pilsley area where she lived all her life. She was a real community leader and a real community-minded person. She worked tirelessly, and she will be missed by many, many people in the village. I just pass on my condolences.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Councillor Dale.
Thank you, Chair. If I could just associate myself with all the words that have been spoken. I didn't know Anne well, but I do remember in my first year as a councillor, she was chair of the council and a very welcoming person, very friendly, and she'll be deeply missed, I'm sure, by all across the chamber. And on behalf of the Conservative Group, our deepest condolences to her friends and family and the Labour Group in particular. I'm sure very upset. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Come back to the substantive agenda then, please. So apologies for absence have been received from Councillors Gomez, Reaney, Parkin and Lilly. Are there any other apologies? Councillor Dale.
Just Councillor Hall to add, Chair.
Any others? If we've not, we go to item 2, declarations of interest. Members are requested to declare the existence and nature of any disposable pecuniary interest and or other interests not already on their register of interests in any items on the agenda and withdraw from the meeting at the appropriate time. Are there any declarations? Councillor Dale.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'm advised for item 10, being a county councillor, that I should declare the interest. There's nothing in the paper that would lead it to be a conflict. It's only really a paper to note. So I'm intending to stay and obviously present and discuss and vote in paper, but just to highlight it.
Councillor Lewis.
Likewise, item 10 on the agenda, same reasons as Councillor Dale. I will remain if that is okay, but I probably won't take part in the debate for obvious reasons.
Councillor Rennick. Councillor Mark Foster.
Exactly the same, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Cupid. It's easy if we say who isn't a county councillor. Councillor Huxley Foster. Thank you. Any other declarations? Thank you. So item 3, minutes of the meeting held on the 3rd of March 2022 have been circulated. Sorry, 7th of March. Councillor Dale.
Happy to move them, Chair.
Councillor Cupid. Councillor Shipman.
Hello? Yeah, under 108, it says that Councillor Parkin gave a report on the level of council tax. And it's not here, it weren't there at that meeting either. So that obviously is correct to who actually gives that report.
Councillor Dale?
I think it was me, Chair, in his
It was.
absence, yeah.
So with the meeting's acceptance of that, Councillor Parkin did not provide a report. It was Councillor Dale. So that will be amended in the minutes, if you're all happy with that. So it's been moved and seconded. All in favour with the amendment? Anyone against? Any abstentions? That's carried. Thank you. Item 4, Chair's announcements. On the 14th of April, the consort and I represented the council at the funeral of Mrs. Frida Walker, former consort of Bolsover District Council. The service was well attended by a community who wanted to show their respect for all Frida, along with her husband Ken, had achieved on their behalf. It was poignant for many reasons. It was, of course, a funeral that was too soon. Frida's life was taken away in tragic circumstances and shocked us all. May she rest in peace. In addition, we have attended the civic services for Amber Valley Borough Council and Bolsover District. Our council's civic service for the Queen's Jubilee is at St John's Church, Walton, on the 22nd of May. It would be great to see you there. Jean and I visited Camp Inspire, organised by Chesterfield Community Trust for the whole of the Easter holidays for children on free school meals from Chesterfield and North East Derbyshire. It was wonderful to see participants engaging in worthwhile activities that helped to build self-esteem. It truly was inspirational. Events such as Camp Inspire are important aspects of the civic role, as is fundraising for our chosen charity. And I wish to thank Councillor Ross Shipman for offering to have a sponsored haircut to realise funds for the hospice. And I believe it's £500 over.
Just shy of 540.
So is that 541?
No.
So as you can see, he survived the ordeal and didn't allow me anywhere near his hair. Apparently I can't keep a steady hand. So, but thank you, Councillor Shipman, for your support. Tickets are now on sale for my big band bonanza on the 14th of May, featuring guest speaker General David Leakey, who was former Black Rod in Parliament. Also will be the Kalamazoo dance band for that Glenn Miller sound. So let's hope that you can get in the mood. It's the best I can do. I couldn't think of any other Glenn Miller jokes. To come along for my last fundraising event. Wipe those tears away. Thank you. So item 5, leaders' announcements.
Thank you, Chair. We have a busy agenda, so there are just 3 main items I wanted to update Council on. The first was the Homes for Ukraine scheme. Since the scheme was first announced, officers have been extremely busy working to meet the requirements on local authorities. We're working very closely with other district and borough councils, as well as the county council, as well as other partner organisations, including in the community and voluntary sector. Our core role within the guidance is to provide the home safety checks. And I'm really pleased to say that our environmental health team have been leading the way across the county in terms of establishing a standardised digital accommodation inspection process, which will be available for all authorities to use throughout the county. And it also collects data to support the county council in carrying out the DBS check as well. In addition, officers have worked hard to pull together a comprehensive welcome pack for Ukrainian arrivals to ensure that they quickly feel at home in the district, and also to understand how to access all the relevant services that they might need, for example, libraries, leisure centres, how to contact a counsellor, how to get in touch with the parish council, all of those sorts of things that, you know, people arriving in the area, not knowing the area very well, might need to think about accessing. We've also provided all Ukrainian arrivals with a free leisure pass for use in any of our 4 facilities, both for the purposes of promoting health and well-being, but also so that they can keep in touch with us by visiting our services and hopefully meet people locally as well. Finally, I was really pleased to be able to pay a visit to who we believe was the first family to arrive in North East Derbyshire, to welcome them, and also to say a huge thank you on behalf of the district to the sponsor couple. And it goes without saying that this huge thank you extends to all those who've decided to do something amazing by pledging to sponsor guests from Ukraine. Moving on, we've recently received the details of our UK Shared Prosperity Fund grant from the government, which totals £2.57 million for North East Derbyshire. The fund is intended to spread opportunity and prosperity to all of our communities. We're informed that the fund allows a high degree of flexibility so that local decision making can help target it towards local priorities and needs. The Cabinet is going to meet with senior officers in the coming weeks to discuss how we can utilise this important funding, and we will obviously share details with colleagues in due course as they arise. And then finally, in terms of climate change, I just wanted to highlight a recent success in being named by Friends of the Earth as one of 40 councils in the country leading the way on tackling climate change. In particular, they highlighted the council and Ricknell's work on retrofitting EWI to hundreds of homes across the district, helping to reduce carbon emissions and energy bills for our tenants. Friends of the Earth had this to say: North East Derbyshire District Council has navigated complex funding opportunities to make sure it prioritises energy efficiency upgrades for the council house residents in most need. This is important work that joins up the climate emergency with addressing fuel poverty. We'll obviously be hearing more about this important work later on in the agenda. So on that note, Chair, I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So item 6 is public participation, but I can advise you that no questions have been submitted by the public. So we move to item 7, the Independent Remuneration Panel Members Allowance Scheme. So I'm going to hand over now to the Assistant Director of Governance and Monitoring Officer to present the report.
Thank you, Chair. Is it working? I'll start. If you want me to repeat it, please just ask me to. Council has a duty to appoint an independent remuneration panel to review the members' allowances. They have a duty to do this on a regular basis. That panel has now met. Details of the members of the panel are in paragraph 1.2 of the report. They had a considerable amount of information to compare relating to the members' allowances in other districts and boroughs in the county, and this is also listed in the report. Having considered the information supplied and that the allowances haven't been increased recently, the panel concluded that they should recommend an increase in line with the previously recommended increases. The recommendations therefore propose an increase for all the members' allowances with the exception of PC consumables. There is a member working party currently looking at members' ICT, and so this will be looked at further in due course by that group. There is no recommendation to increase the co-optees allowance. There is also a recommendation to index the allowances and the increases in future to staff pay awards for the next 4 years. Finally, you're being asked to approve the members' allowances scheme for 2022-23, including the above changes. And if members could indicate if they want me to repeat any of that, please let me know.
Now, so we've got the recommendations at pages 22 and 23, or 23 and 24. Do you have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Dale, and a seconder, Councillor Cupid. Do we have any questions? Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Chair. We consider this, I group considered it, and given that the motion that we've submitted, we don't feel that at this time it's appropriate to be, we feel hypocritical really to vote for this at this time. So, and that's not to undermine the work we do as councillors in the democratic process, obviously, because I think we should be valued in that role. But at this time, we don't think it's appropriate to be accepting this increase. Thank you.
Councillor Shipman.
Hello. I agree with Councillor Barker here. I think it would have been good, I don't know if this is possible, for us to vote on either removing 1 and 2 of the recommendations or voting on them in chunks here, because I can support the rest, but I cannot support 1 and 2 in this, which is to increase members' allowances and the increase in the SRA stuff. if you remember, I brought a motion here, what were it, a year, 2 years ago? Where Councillor Dale stood up and said, what's the point in adopting this? Because we're not going to increase members' allowances whilst we're in this current term. Well, here we are now looking at increasing members' allowances. So either it was misleading the council at that point or something else. But I can't see how we can vote for this, especially after the promises that have been made by the leadership of this council.
Any other comments or questions? I'm going to ask Councillor Dale to reply.
I think is it on? It's working. Okay, thank you. I think it's worth highlighting that these are, at the beginning of the paper refers to increases that were set before even our administration came into power, that they weren't implemented for the past 2 years. There is a 2-year saving in the financial recommendations, financial implications rather, for not having implemented any increases for the previous 2 years. I have sympathy with the view of both the Labour Group and the Lib Dem Group. I think it's always a difficult thing to do, but the whole point of having an independent remuneration panel is that it's independent of the council. We shouldn't set our own wages, we shouldn't set our own salaries, and having it looked at independently is the best way to do it. And now if we were to then turn around and reject those or amend them to something completely different, that wouldn't be independent anymore. It would be politicians interfering with how they are paid. So I think from my perspective, although it's a difficult decision, and I don't think it's something that we particularly enjoy doing at this moment in time, clearly there's a cost of living issues and all of the other things, but to reject this, for me, what's the point in having the IRP in the first place? That's my perspective, Chair. I think we'll be voting in favour.
Right, we are going to go to the vote. I'm going to split the recommendations. So we are going to take 1 and 2 together, and then 3 and 9 together. So we're voting on the recommendations 1 and 2 on page 23. So all those in favour, you show your hands for recommendations 1 and 2. Against? Any abstentions? Thank you. So 1 and 2 are carried. So we now go to recommendations 3 to 9 inclusive. All those in favour? Those against? Any abstentions? 2 abstentions. 3 to 9 are carried. Thank you. So now move to item 8, the proposed calendar of meetings for 2022-23. Back to you, Mr. Sternberg.
Thank you, Chair. Each year, the Council has to agree its schedule of meetings for the forthcoming year. A draft is presented following extensive consultation in respect to the legal needs for the timing of meetings. Attached is a draft for your consideration and approval. The recommendations are on page 34 and include a delegation for me to amend the calendar of meetings following discussions with the relevant chair. Thank you, Chair.
So you can see the recommendations. Do we have a proposer, please? Councillor Dale, thank you. A seconder? Councillor Cupid, thank you. Are there any comments or questions? Councillor Cooper.
There seems to be a conflict on the planning one in May. There's a date already booked in for May, and then there's a second one here. I just want to clarify whether or not there's going to be 2 planning meetings in May or just the 1.
Mr. Marr?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. The principal meeting in May will be the one which is already in the diary on the 17th. But there's another one, which is later in the month, I think towards the end of May, And that's been put in essentially just almost as a holding measure if it was required. If the meeting is not required, then with the agreement of the chair, the meeting will be cancelled, and then the next planning committee will be the one in June. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks for that. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Shipman?
Thank you, Chair. One thing I would raise is, I know audit that I sit on, the meeting started at 3, and what's become apparent since becoming a dad is that I have to pick my kid up from childcare before 5:30 from Nottingham. So I have to get from here to Nottingham, pick my kid up on a Wednesday every week. And the turnaround time to get from my meeting at the audit to there, you know, sometimes I have to miss the end of that meeting or have to pay the fine if I'm late at picking him up. So it would be nice to consider like having them either a bit earlier or, you know, after that point which is picked up. So it's just something to consider really. Obviously.
And this is a perennial question that's come up for the last 16 years that I know of. And what we've always said is that it's down to individual chairs of scrutiny committees in consultation with committee to agree times and dates. And I think the problem is you'll never suit everyone. So that's down to the individual scrutiny committee that you're on. And I know ultimately some people have had to change scrutiny because of that. But they're the provisional dates as they stand until the beginning of the new civic year, subject to whoever the chairs are. Any other comments or questions? If not, it's been moved and seconded. Can we go to the vote then, please? All those in favour? Anyone against? Any abstentions? Thank you. Carried. So we move to item 9, review of the Constitution. Back to you, Mrs. Sternberg. It's becoming a catchphrase.
Next slide, please. Thank you, Chair. The Council's Constitution is reviewed annually through the Standards Committee. Recommendations are then made for changes, and these are contained in the table attached to the report for you. In relation to the JCG changes, this is subject to further consideration, so it is a conditional approval. The report outlines the matters that the Standards Committee have recommended, and these are also listed at page 59 at 2.2. And I'm sorry, I haven't got the recommendations page.
The recommendations are on page 57. So we need a proposer. Thank you, Councillor Armitage, and the seconder. Thank you, Councillor Antcliffe. Are there any comments or questions? Yes, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask about the changes on the petitions scheme. Petitions are something that's vitally important to people that want to represent their views to the council and make their views known. It says that the decision on whether the petition will be acceptable by the council or held is to be made by the head of a paid service. But what there isn't there is any kind of criteria or any description on what might be an acceptable petition and what might not. It would be useful to have that in advance so that people didn't waste their time putting things in that were going to be not acceptable. And it would be good guidance to forming petitions if they knew what the criteria was for acceptance or not.
Thank you, Councillor Pickering. Do you want to answer that now, Mr. Sternberg?
Yes, thank you, Chair. This was meant to deal with a very narrow situation where there is some form of consultation going on to do with the subject matter of the petition, and the council would have to look at whether the consultation would be invalidated if they dealt with a petition. It's not criteria for petition in the first place. I will look to clarify that to make it clear. Now you've raised it, but it's not meant to affect normal petitions outside that situation.
Thank you for the Councillor Shipman.
Thank you, Chair. One thing I would raise, and it's related to my motion later on, is that there's a constitutional process failure in how we handle revoking plan applications. Because in order for the planning committee to debate revoking again, it has to come here first and then go back to planning, which, you know, that time frame could be weeks if it's not timed perfectly. And therefore that costs the council money the longer that goes on. And it would be good if, let's say, the chair of the planning committee could put something on the planning committee, or I don't know, just looking a number out of thin air, like 4 planning committee members could make that request. So something goes back on the planning committee. So I think it's wrong, but all 53 of us are voting, have to vote to put something on what really is just a process issue. And there needs to be like some room for the chair or members of that committee to put something back on if they feel it needs to discuss it. Because as you'll hear later, the planning committee has almost been helpless in handling that particular issue. And like I said, I think we need to look at perhaps changing the constitution to give members that ability to do that.
Thank you, Chair. That's something we'll put down for standards committee for the new corporate year.
Councillor Dale.
Thank you, Judge. Just to cover off the petition scheme issue, just for absolute clarity, this is about opening the petition scheme back up. It was under the last administration that a change to the petition scheme was introduced, which barred any petitions coming to full council that were on any matter that was or may ever be subject to consultation and the local plan. And that had the effect of preventing a 4,000 signature petition on the Greenbelt coming to have a debate in this chamber. So having this rule change that allows Lee as a managing director to go against that policy, I think is a step in the right direction. This is about opening the petition scheme back up. It's not about closing it down in any way.
Any other comments or questions? Councillor Armitage, do you want to reply?
Okay, thank you. Are we on now? Hello? Right. We discussed this at great length, and it was approved by all members and all parties at the committee. So, we've gone so far with it, and I hope that Councillor Shipman will read this from cover to cover, and then you'll know everything about it. So, good luck with it.
Right, we'll move to recommendations then. So, all those in favour? Anyone against? So I can't keep a straight face. Any abstentions? No, that's carried. Thank you. So item 10, the Vision Derbyshire County Deal and Devolution. Does anything you want to add to the?
No, Chair, I think we dealt with the declarations which have already been made.
Thank you. So we need to move to the proposal recommendations.
Yeah.
So, Councillor Mayor.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just make a few remarks in terms of introducing the paper. I'm not proposing to go through it in detail. It's there on the page. So just a few, hopefully, quick remarks, as I say. Clearly, Vision Derbyshire has progressed over the past year or so, albeit it's sort of fairly gradual change. There is now a joint committee with an established terms of reference, and a business unit has been established to support the project work. 4 authorities so far have taken the decision to join as full constituent members. At North East Derbyshire, we have yet to take any decision on this, and if we do intend to join, then it will be a matter for full council to determine. At the moment, with what's happening with the county deals, which I'll come on to, and the potential for Vision Derbyshire to need to be tweaked in order to fit within any structure of a county deal, then my view is that we should wait for the time being and see what the outcome is before taking any decision on whether to subscribe to the full Vision Derbyshire model. That said, we continue to be a full active participant in Vision Derbyshire project as non-constituent members alongside other councils who haven't joined as well. Indeed, we continue to take a leading role within the climate change work stream with Lee Hickin as the lead officer within the county, and I know Councillor Kenyon has been participating in all the meetings, the product of which we'll be discussing at the next item on the agenda. It remains my firm belief that we should continue to collaborate with fellow councils within Vision Derbyshire, as there are real benefits to be achieved for both ourselves and for our residents and businesses. But I hope you'll agree that it's right to take a pragmatic approach around whether or not to join as a full member until things become clearer with devolution. The paper before you today is asking for endorsement of this position, but continuing to have a seat at the table and playing an active role working with other councils under the umbrella of Vision Derbyshire. The paper also covers what we know about county deals and devolution at this stage. Again, I won't repeat what it says, but instead I'll make a few key points. We are still very clearly at a very early stage in the negotiation process. And there will be a lot of information and discussion that's likely to arise over the coming weeks and months. The exact nature of the final deal and what that will look like is still very much to be determined. Contrary to what some people are saying, this is not about local government reform or unitarisation. The white paper is absolutely clear that there is still a role for district and borough councils to play in all of this, albeit without the power of a veto, which has held back previous devolution deals. It is likely that there will be both opportunities and possibly some challenges that arise out of the final deal, and we need to play a participative role in the discussions over the coming weeks and months in order to truly understand what is on offer, what role we can play and how we can champion the interests of residents and businesses within North East Derbyshire. I know some councils have taken an early decision to isolate themselves from this whole process and, in my view, bury their heads in the sand hoping it will go away. I really can't stress enough that I think that that is the wrong approach for this council. Whether we like it or not, devolution in some form is going to happen in Derbyshire sooner or later, and our residents and communities are best served by us being firmly at the table, willing and ready to discuss options, participating with fellow councils for the common good, and being ready to champion the interests of our district. That's the approach we're seeking the endorsement of today, the continuation of, and clearly we'll bring further updates in future meetings as the situation with the county deal develops. There are the meetings that are being organised by the county to keep all members informed, and please do attend those where you're able to. I'll keep sending the invitations out as I receive them. But on that note, Chair, I'm happy to move the recommendations.
Do you have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Cupid. So it's comments and questions. Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thanks, Alex. And I've heard what you've said, and I've read through the paper several times, and I've tried to line it with the stuff I've been hearing in press and on television about this super authority and the combined authority. And I'm struggling to see where we fit with this. It does, and I've listened to what you've said, and you're saying it's the start of a process, whilst in others it feels like a fait accompli that we're already signing up, we're down the road of signing up for that. And my question to all of it is, what's in it for North East Derbyshire? Because my fear, and it's shared by our group, and it has been portrayed elsewhere, that this will lead to electing an elected mayor and subsequently another tier of government. And I know we're on the start of that road, but this feels like very much it, which will probably mean an end down the line of district councils. I accept that you're not admitting to that, and it's been stressed in the Zoom meetings that I've been to, that's not the intention, but, and it is a big but, I'm afraid I don't trust what you're telling us. I really don't. To be blunt, this is the problem when we've got a leader of our authority is also a cabinet member of another authority and other members on the county council. As was argued a while ago, there's a clear conflict of interest here, and it's always our leader represented. Is it this authority or the county council? Again, to be frank, we believe this is the first step to electing a mayor for Derbyshire, Derby, Nottinghamshire, Nottingham. And if we do that, I reckon I know where the majority of the levelling funding will go, and it'll not be in North East Derbyshire. Also, when we get a report that comes late and is part of agenda with 396 pages, that makes me suspicious that we've got something tied. Whilst we support the concept of Vision Derbyshire and authorities working collaboratively, we believe that we would want more reassurances as to what is in it for North East Derbyshire and the people and communities within it. We are, of course, in favour of extra funding and devolved powers for North East Derbyshire. After all, we have, as a local government in general, has suffered a decade of cuts with Tory austerity policies, but not at any price, and above all, not at the detriment of people who live in North East Derbyshire. Hopefully you've heard our comments and reservations, which you can feed into the process. And I accept what you've said, and I understand there'll be another chance to vote on this further down the line, and that is when we can make our final decision. But at this point, we feel as though we just need to abstain at this point and keep the options open. So that's where we sit, Alex.
Any other comments or questions? Councillor Shipman?
Thank you, Chair. I agree with almost everything Councillor Barker just said, apart from his last bit, because I'm going to be voting against this. I agree with him the fact that we want to work collaboratively with us. Let's merge services where it can be merged. But what we're hearing in the press is we're going to end up with an elected mayor. And if we end up with an elected mayor, it's another layer of government in between that people have no relation to whatsoever. There's talk of tax rises, so an additional tax revenue that's going to be coming in to pay for their expensive officers and staff that's unnecessary. There's nothing right now stopping the government, if there was the political will, investing in local government in Derbyshire. Absolutely nothing. It's just that there's no political will at the highest levels of this country, which is why we're not getting that money. We don't have to go down an elected mayor route. There's other ways we can do it. We've been working with Bolsover for how many years now, and we're pulling away from that, the way things currently are. So where we have been saving money, we're actually coming away from that and blowing more money on you know, taking services in-house and whatnot. I think it's just totally wrong. And what's the point in now spending more money and sending officers to join these meetings when ultimately we're going to end up with more bureaucracy and higher taxes for people in North East Derbyshire? I cannot vote for this, and I won't be abstaining at all. I think I feel that strongly about it. I need to vote against it.
Councillor Hancock?
Thank you, Chair. Again, I echo both what Councillor Shipman and Councillor Barker have said. We know ourselves, we had a conversation not that many months ago about bin collections. We know how different North East Derbyshire is to what Chesterfield Borough. It's huge differences. We are the ones who are most closely in contact with the people that we serve. So this whole idea about making things on a bigger scale, we've seen it failed before time and time again. So there are areas where you can vote jointly. I mean, we do payroll, let's face it, across the whole county. We make payroll for every district and county council there. But when it comes to services, it needs to be kept as local as possible. And to me, this whole thing is actually taking away local democracy. It's not actually helping build towards it. So again, I mean, Ross has made it quite clear the Lib Dem group are voting against it. Obviously, we keep an open mind if things change when it comes to us in the future, but certainly what we've got on the table right now is not something we can support.
Any other comments? Councillor Dale to respond.
Thank you, Chair. Quite a lot to try and address there. Obviously, fully respect the position of the opposition and the Dem group. You can decide to vote however you want, but to try and go through some of the issues that were raised, I think in terms of the conflicts, I mean, Barry would vouch for this if he was able to speak, but I have not taken part in any of the negotiations on the county perspective. It is not my role to do so. I don't attend Vision Derbyshire meetings as a county councillor. I attend them as leader of the district council, and that is my position throughout. So I don't believe that conflict exists. I'm here to represent North East Derbyshire. I always attend those meetings very clearly with North East Derbyshire's position. We don't always agree with what's on the table with Vision Derbyshire. We're one of the authorities that are choosing to sit outside the tent at the moment because I think that's the best place to be. So I don't think that conflict exists to the same level. The question of what do we get out of it? Well, it's still a bit unclear because we're only at the very beginning of a negotiation, but it could be, hundreds of millions of pounds for the whole region. The East Midlands as an area has massively suffered with underinvestment, but that's not just Tory government underinvestment. That's historic. That goes over the past 20, 25 years. That's across government. And if you want to look at the facts and the data around this, this is not a political issue. This is a historic issue with the East Midlands, and this is our opportunity potentially to turn that around. And I think it would be foolish of us to turn away from all of what's happening on the basis that we don't like it, we don't want it to happen to us. The reality is, as a district, we don't have any veto in this anyway, so we might as well try and be at the table and try and get what we can for North East Derbyshire. That's the really important thing from my perspective. And I really can't stress enough, it is a negotiation. We don't know what the final deal will be. We don't know whether it will include an elected mayor yet or not. It's better that we're at least participating there at the table, ready to engage, ready to discuss and ready to champion North East Derbyshire. That's the role that I think that we ought to be playing. That's the role that I intend to play. Just on the point, just one final point around tax rises. A lot's been made of that in the media, but I think it's a bit of a storm in a teacup, to be honest. The reality is that, yes, I believe the county has put forward that they would like the ability to add a precept. Of all of the directly elected mayors around the country, I think there's 10 in total that have asked for that, the powers to do that. And of the 10, only 2 have actually used them. And it might not surprise members to be aware that the 2 members that have used them are Labour members. So eight of the directly elected mayors have those powers but do not choose to use them. So the idea that it's always about taxing or creating additional bureaucracy is not necessarily the case. I think really this is about seeing what we can get. It might be that a directly elected mayor is not the price that we want to pay for the deal that's on the table, but I don't know that yet. So why don't we just participate, continue to be involved, and find out, and then come back to the council and we can discuss it properly then. We're not really voting on anything other than, in this paper, wanting to just continue to be involved, be engaged, keep you all informed of what's happening, and then go from there. Okay.
Thank you. So we've had the recommendations moved and seconded. All those in favour? All those against? Any abstentions? Recommendations are carried. We move to item 11, Vision Derbyshire Climate Change Strategy. So over to you, please, Councillor Kenyon.
That's close enough. Everybody in? There we go. So this paper is to agree to collaborate with other Derbyshire councils, the districts, borough and county. And in fact, it actually comes out of the districts coming together with county, and it's the portfolio holders from each district and area to discuss exactly what we can collaborate on. So it's sort of the best of Vision Derbyshire really and what it's all about, rather than it being about unionisation. So as it stands, county have got their climate strategy, and we've got, as a district, we've got our climate strategy. And there's clearly a set of things that sort of fit in between that we could really benefit from working on together. And so far, we've identified 5 themes, which are listed in section 2.4 of the report in detail later in chapter 5. And that includes things like procurement, planning, charging infrastructure, business emissions, energy generation, green innovation, green jobs, improving housing efficiency, working with our community to help reduce their carbon footprint, travel, reducing waste, increasing recycling, all those sorts of things where working together would be more effective than working alone. And depending on what the theme is, different councils might take the lead. There's nothing prescriptive about it, but there's certainly no point in us all reinventing the wheel. So this strategy is a starting point. It will continue to evolve and new things will probably be added into it. Other things we might decide to roll our own on as it goes. I think we have a great starting point for working together. So I move the recommendation in the paper to endorse the publication and delivery of the Vision Derbyshire Climate Change Strategy.
Thank you. Seconder, Councillor Dale. Comments and questions, please. Councillor Barker.
Yeah, just a comment really, and it's a good document, it's a good strategy, and it does show the advantages of working together across the county, and I don't think we can do this on our own, as they say, it takes some doing. But I welcome the paper, Jeremy, and well done.
Councillor Shipman.
Thank you, Chair. Agree with Nigel again. This is the sort of stuff that Vision Derbyshire should be used for, actual collaborative working like this. We don't need to have this extra layer of bureaucracy. We should be doing it on projects like this across the county, so we can actually work together. But like I said, what we need is money from government. The government could be giving us money for projects like this and strategies like this. Instead, they're trying to lure us in into other structures where we have no veto to get out of.
Any other comments? Councillor Hancock.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you, Chair. Just to add, I think whilst we're talking about collaborative, we're one of the key districts that actually borders with another county. So we can't pretend that the top end of our county was involved in South Yorkshire, so it would be nice to actually see some engagement there and actually extend beyond this Derbyshire mentality and actually go out, because we've got a huge city literally on the doorstep. So I would like to see some good expansion there.
Good luck, Councillor Hancock.
Yes, yes.
Any other comments? Councillor Dale, I know you didn't exercise your right to hold back on the seconding that original one.
Thank you very much. I thought I'd just highlight some of the contradictions there between the previous paper and this paper. I mean, Councillor Shipman refers to this being exactly the sort of thing that Vision Derbyshire should be doing. Well, it is the sort of thing that Vision Derbyshire is doing, and that's the whole point. I think there was another, and then there was a request for more investment in the district and more investment in the county. Well, that's what's on offer through the county deal and through what's been put forward there. So when we try to start a negotiation, or when the county starts to try and start a negotiation, Councillor Shipman says he doesn't want it. And then moreover, we've got Councillor Hancock then suggesting we ought to expand this super authority to cover South Yorkshire as well, which is just absolutely beyond me, to be honest.
Point of order, Chair, that's not what we said.
No, it wasn't. No, point taken, Councillor Hancock. It wasn't quite said that way. So, I'm trying to be fair. We were doing so well up until that point, doing so well. Councillor Kenyon to reply.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, where to go with that discussion? I mean, Vision Derbyshire is an example. Let's make this an example of what we can do with our current structures. Essentially, we've got 8 districts or 7 districts, borough, whatever. We've got city. Let's work together, and I agree on the Sheffield point as well. Let's work with Sheffield. We have done a little bit. We went to see a factory doing modular housing, which was ultra low carbon housing, and that was arranged by Sheffield City Region. But there is more that can be done there, absolutely. And in terms of collaborating, let's also not forget our parishes. We have 50 odd parishes, is it? A huge number. And they have influence. So it's all about collaborating, and I think we're in a good place to progress that at all levels. Thank you.
Thank you. You can tell the councillors who weren't on council when we debated Sheffield City Region. Anyway, it's been moved and seconded. All in favour? Anyone against? Any abstentions? That's carried. Thank you. So we'll move to item 12, the Ricknell Homes Limited presentations. Just did a pause between Ricknell Homes and Limited. So I'm going to invite Neil Clark, please, and your colleague to speak with us. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. I understand the limited bit. Good afternoon, Council. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Neil Clark, Director of Property Services and Development at Ricknell Homes. We've been asked this afternoon to provide some information about the work and investment that is going on in the district, the Council's housing stock. I'm not going to read every point in the presentation, I understand you all have them, but I'll touch on the key issues. So there is a commitment in the district to regenerate, undertake works to the Council's hard-to-treat homes. In 2019, an external expert, Curtains, were instructed to review the Council's non-traditional housing stock and identify priorities for investment over the next 5 years. The Council, working with Ricknell Homes, have secured £2.1 million worth of government funding to the Green Homes project to support energy improvements to council-owned housing stock. This is for the provision of external wall insulation. This has enabled an acceleration in the programme for improving council-owned housing stock. The council has invested a further £10.4 million in addition to the central government funding, and we are currently delivering a total investment of £12.5 million. That investment has allowed works to be undertaken to 427 of the council's non-traditional housing stock. These were identified as priorities from the Curtains report, and the works to improve the insulation levels for those homes will be complete by June 22, in line with the government's funding requirements. Works have been undertaken in Mickley, Dronfield, Unson, Cutthorpe, Wessington, Barlow, Woolly Moor, Holly Moorside, Renisham and Eckington. So right across the district where there is need for improving the quality of housing. There are around 900 council-owned homes that will still require investment at the end of this programme, and we are currently working very hard with colleagues at the council on prioritising where we will be moving to next and the level of investment that is required to continue this great programme of work. As you will probably be aware, the non-traditional housing stocks are located right across the district in all communities, and we have a number of different types of properties. The common theme amongst these properties is they are hard to heat. That can produce the risk of fuel poverty for residents living in those, and they can present a very high maintenance burden as well. The improvements that we're currently delivering and have planned for the future benefit the families living in these homes because they make them much warmer and easier to keep warm. They improve the aesthetics of individual properties and the street scene in the communities in which they are located. And they tie in with the council's commitment to reduce carbon emissions across the district. In addition to the external wall insulation, we also undertake detailed works, new windows, roofs where required, quite technically challenging structural works to some of the properties. And this allows us to deliver a whole house approach so that we tackle all the issues with that particular property type in one go. There's some photos in the presentation of typical properties before and after the works, and hopefully you can see the improvement that this investment has led to. One of the key issues for residents whilst living in these homes is that there is a level of disruption during the works. Depending on the property type, the disruption is mainly external and fairly minimal. For some of the more challenging property types, the disruption is significant, and we are working in people's homes for anything up to 12 weeks. The majority of the works are external, as I've already said, and one property type in particular, the area type, are particularly challenging. And within the presentation, there are some images of the type of disruption that residents have to be supported with to enable us to achieve the level of work that is required. The area properties in particular require a full removal of the external wall of the existing property, full structural works to transfer the load from the existing steel columns within the buildings to the new external wall, and that requires temporary propping to be inserted into the properties whilst families are occupying. So very intrusive, and it's very important that we support customers during that process. Before we start working on any property, we undertake a full survey of each individual property to establish the individual requirements for that particular home, and we work with the customer within that home, their family, their support network, and anybody that needs to be involved to help that family, those people living in their homes, to cope with the level of disruption. We go through a full induction programme with customers where we explain to them in great detail how the works will be undertaken, the programme of works, the disruption, the key points of contact, both from Ricknold Council and from our contractor, so they know where to turn to if they are experiencing difficulties. And we get to know those individuals' families so that we can make sure that we tier our support to suit them. Some families are one person, maybe two people in the property. We also have homes that have got large numbers of residents living there, and the support needs are different for each type of home. We provide detailed information to each family about what will be happening, when things will be happening, and how to get support if they are struggling. We also make families aware that weather conditions can affect the programme of works. Some of the work that we do cannot be undertaken in cold weather, cannot be undertaken in very wet weather, and we have to make them aware that there may sometimes be delays to programme of works. And that's not because we're trying to be difficult, but that's because we need to make sure we deliver a technically compliant project at the end of the day. We provide constant support through the contractor's resident liaison officer and the site management in each location. Our own clerk of works makes sure that the technical specifications are met, and we provide dedicated customer liaison officers for each and every home should they need support. And we visit them regularly to make sure that the works are going to programme and that any problems that arise are being dealt with on a regular basis. Where customers do raise concerns, we address those. We've had concerns raised through some of yourselves here this afternoon, and we follow up on those and make sure we include those to everybody's satisfaction. We regularly inspect the site works as you would expect, and we make sure that at the end of the project, both the government's criteria for funding and our specifications and the expectations of this council are fully met. We complete a handover process by making sure that the customers' feedback and experience is taken account of, and we use that information to improve what we do and learn from issues that have arisen during the project. And we will also always ensure that where a problem has been raised, we will address that concern and look to learn from that experience. The second presentation is just a little bit of information about what currently is going on in terms of regeneration projects as we speak today. I touched on earlier about Curtin being appointed to undertake detailed surveys of the council housing stock. This is the second survey they've actually done. They did one back in 2008 to actually start the process of looking at regeneration across the district. There's a little bit of detail about the different types of properties there are in the district that the council own. I'm not going to go into too many details about those. But what I can say is that all the urgent recommendations from the 2009 report were fully addressed in the timeframes that Curtin set. We're now delivering the next set of priorities, the 427 homes that I've just talked about. And by the end of the current financial year, that's 22-23, then the priority one repairs to the area properties will also be complete. The remaining works to the council's owned non-tribe homes will be programmed in over the next few years, and the recommendations from the current report are included in the capital programme financially working with Jane and her. In addition to doing work to the council's non-traditional existing stock, we're also delivering a project for the council at Pine View in Danesmore, where we are constructing 9 new bungalows. This is a scheme where the council, as well as providing the funding to build the homes, they have invested an additional amount of £18,000 per property to install new technology in these homes. They will have solar panels on the roofs, they will have air source heat pumps, they will have underfloor heating, assistive technology for residents to help them be able to stay in their own home for as long as possible, electric vehicle charging points, and dedicated parking provision for every new home on that estate. And at the same time, we're also constructing new parking provision for every existing home within that community. In addition to the Pine View project, we currently have a planning application being considered for the development of 72 new homes at Whiteley's Avenue in North Wingfield. For those members that have been around for a little while, they'll remember that this is a follow-on from other work over a number of years to both improve the quality and provision of housing in North Wingfield and deal with a large area of non-traditional housing stock. We are looking forward to having an outcome of the planning application hopefully next month, and we are currently in the process of working to procure specialist teams and a developer to get onto site later this year, and we hope to be starting to build new homes later this year with some completions during next year. So we've got a 2-year build programme on that project. We're also working with council officers and colleagues on looking at what new properties are available through the Section 106 process, where affordable homes are required to be delivered on other new build sites. And we're doing appraising the number of schemes at the moment, working with colleagues on that with the council. And we're also looking at where there are further opportunities in the district around council owned garage sites and other areas where the council may be able to bring forward more new homes, further regeneration opportunities in a range of locations across the district. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Clark? Councillor Morley.
Could you tell me how many council houses sold last year?
I'm sorry, I can't write it. You put me on the spot with that one. So.
So, if I can ask you the second one. That's okay with the chair?
Yes.
Count out the first one, then the second one. What it is, in Clay Cross, we've got a lot of single people in the 60s to 70s, married couples in the 60s to 70s, and buying bungalows. And what you said about the 9, well, they're living in 3-bedroom houses, family houses. We've got one person living on. Now they've been on the list for 2 or 3 years, can't get the bungalow for the money. And that's building up, building up. Is there anything you can do for these people to move? Well, like, obviously, if you're selling council houses, they're not replacing, aren't they? When you're shrinking.
In terms of the first point, in terms of, I can't answer give you a direct number, but in terms of generally, to the right to buy process, around 50 homes each year go through right to buy. However, there are a number of properties that are also acquired during the year as well. I can certainly provide the facts directly after if that's acceptable. In terms of housing allocation, there is currently a review of the council's allocations policy underway, and that the issue that you've raised is one that has been raised elsewhere as well, and the process for reviewing the allocation policy is still ongoing. And if there are families, couples or individuals that want to move to smaller accommodation, we do everything we can to try and support those. But there is a large demand for housing, as you're aware, and a lot of people stay there on those for an awful long time, which is a good thing. So there's a mix to how we deal with those things, but wherever possible, people are moved to accommodation that is suitable.
Thank you. Councillor Brian Wright.
Thank you, Chair. You're not standing.
What, in 2023? I
am. It seems a long time ago now, when I attended numerous public meetings.
Traditional way, where we started, it looked massive, didn't it? Well, it still is. But without you, I think in particular, we won't be where we are trying to tackle these non-traditional houses. So on behalf of me in particular, the 1 hour chair, thank you for all that.
Councillor Hancock.
Thank you, Chair. Just to echo, I mean, the work that's been done here is great. It's brilliant work. It's obviously long needed. I mean, the thing that springs to my mind here is the disruption. When I was a child leader for the council house, and we were moved out when there was this level of work. So, I mean, obviously there are support mechanisms, but it is really just an assurance that our residents are really getting the support they need to, because I wouldn't want to be looking at that in 3 months, if I'm honest.
I'll answer the last point first, if I may, Chair. I can assure you and all members that we have a really strong customer support team. They really are very experienced at doing that. We've been on this journey for 8 to 9 years now, and they really are there to support customers. If they need the technical team to stop work, they are empowered to do that to make sure the customers are supported. And it's a credit to them that, you know, we get lots of positive praise, as some on the back of one of the presentations. And it is a difficult journey for lots of customers, but we do put a real amount of support to them. So, if I may, Chair, just in relation to the other comments as well, this is not about me, this is about Bricknell Homes, led by Lorraine, and also about our team. Helen Brown is our head of development, and she leads on this work now. for Ricknold. So thank you for your good comments and kind comments, but it's a team effort. It's working jointly with the council. This is not all about Ricknold, this is about the joint working that we've been doing for many years. But thank you very much, it is appreciated, and I will feed it back to the team.
Thank you. Don't forget the brilliant board as well. Anyway, it's not about me, you know. Councillor Ridgway.
Yeah, I'd just like to reiterate, yes, I know in Renishaw, the houses look absolutely amazing there. And I know that people are really happy about it. My only one thing is that, is you talk about doing the work that you've done, but loft insulation is very important as well. And I haven't heard any mention of that, because it's all right, you know, keeping the houses warm, but heat rises, as you know. And it's all right keeping the walls and the floors warm, but they need to, you know, so do we talk to them about loft insulation? Do we help them with purchasing loft insulation? Because it is very, very expensive.
So for council-owned homes, there's been a number of programmes over the last 10 years that focused on topping up loft insulation, because it was a low-hanging fruit, it was an easy win. So every council-owned home in the district has a good level of loft insulation. When a home becomes void, it is checked, and if required, it's brought up to the current standard, which is 300 millimetres as a minimum. So every council-owned home will have a good level. Anything that's been void in the last 3 or 4 years will have the current standards. So.
Any others? Councillor Wheelhouse?
Yeah, could I just say, the people that hold their own homes on council estates, are we supportive in getting them to come up to the standards that the district council and Ricknold are doing?
So in terms of private homeowners, we always contact every private homeowner in an estate where we are currently delivering a project on behalf of the council, and we offer them the opportunity of working with our appointed contractors to have the work done at the same time. Now they have to engage independently with our contractors and they have to pay for the work themselves, but we do help facilitate that in terms of contact and who to talk to, etc. The Green Homes project did include an element of funding for homeowners. The take-up of that wasn't as large as anticipated, but there are a number of schemes that are being considered nationally about ways of helping individual homeowners to access this type of investment. The council's environmental health team also have an officer that provides individual support and advice on energy conservation and signposting to other agencies that may be able to help homeowners with this type of work and investment in this type of technology. So we don't deliver it directly, but we do lots of support and signposting. And a number of owner-occupiers do take it up within an estate when they are working there. The numbers are fairly low, to be fair, but there are examples where owners do take the opportunity to have it.
Councillor Rennick?
Yeah, I'd also like to say thank you also to Ricknold and to my cabinet colleagues for supporting these investments. There's no doubt that residents are thrilled with the outcome. I think this is why it's important to show you there's a before and afters. Yes, they recognise there's a challenge with sort of 12 weeks of builders in their property, but they all afterwards say that it was worth it. Not just the aesthetics, but it's the actual energy saving and also in terms of the environment. So a big thanks to everybody involved, and really proud that Levenwick's working for North East Derbyshire.
So on that, Neil, for coming along and giving a very informative presentation, or 2 presentations, and giving the council additional insight into the very positive work of Ricknold Homes. So thank you for coming along today and updating us. Thank you to both of you. Thank you. So item 13, to answer any questions from members asked under Procedure Rule 9.2. We have received 1 question. So Councillor Barry, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair.
It's quite a simple question, really. It was following on from the initial announcement about climate change and everything. We discussed electric charging points in North East Derbyshire. Can the portfolio provide the following details, such as the delivery, meaningful implementation, monitoring, and site infrastructure charges? And I know that the portfolio did get in touch with me, but I was on holiday and I only picked it up this morning.
Councillor Barry, Councillor Kenyon.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you, Councillor Barry. I suppose there are three parts to this. There's our own land, there's our council housing, and there's the wider North East Derbyshire. So on our own land first, at our leisure centres, we've installed charging points at Dronfield Leisure Centre. Though admittedly, so far they're between 2 points, getting 1 car a day using them, which is slightly disappointing, I guess. But we will also be installing charging points as part of the Shelby Park development, and we've surveyed our other main car parks for suitability, and we have applied for grants for some of them. Those grants are assessed by the providers based on the demand, and so far some of them have not made the cut, but we've tried again actually with some of them. We also support on our land business tenants to install charging points. Then on our council housing, as we just been discussing how important that is, large numbers of people there. So new council housing at Pine View, as we've heard, will have new charging points, and we're looking to put that on all new council houses to acquire them, like these being an obvious one to consider there. And as Neil mentioned as well, whenever there's a void, as well as looking at insulation, it's a prime time to consider putting charging points in. So we're investigating whether that's an option. Well, it probably will be. And then for the wider North East Derbyshire, the main responsibility for charging infrastructure lies with the county council, and they are taking the lead on this. We're working with them via the Vision Derbyshire Climate Strategy, for example. And I believe the county are releasing their charging point strategy in the next few months. And then finally, there's also some key national decisions that have been made late last year, such as requiring all new housing to have car charging points, that hopefully will be finalised later this year.
Councillor Barry, you'd like to ask a supplementary question?
Well, I think actually he's answered most of it. I mean, I'm an electric car user myself, and I find it difficult.
Fine.
I mean, there have been various government schemes over the years. I'm not quite sure if there's one running exactly today to give grants to support people doing installations at home. It's sort of not really a district council remit to provide grants for that, though. It would be very expensive for us to be doing that. So we would want to focus more on particular areas. And a big example, of course, is our council housing, where I think we would do the most benefit for people who are, less able to afford it, should we say. So I think we will have to focus on the things where we can make the most difference to people who would struggle otherwise.
So move to item 14 to consider any motions from members under procedure rule number 10. 2 motions have been submitted. The first is from Councillor Shipman. So over to you.
Thank you, Chair. It's almost the same motion that we had 6 months ago, except there's the additional bit where, since we last had the discussion in this council chamber, there's been more information that's come to light on this issue when County carried out the assessment that residents were asking for, or at least part of the assessment that residents were asking for all along. But the whole point of this motion is to just get it back to planning, because like I was saying earlier, there's no way in this constitution for it to get back to planning other than this chamber agreed to send it there. So I think we need to make that decision so that the planning committee can look at all the evidence available and come up with an informed decision. Because right now, I think everyone knows bits and bobs about it, but there's not been that debate where all the evidence could be looked at, and then that decision could be formed. And I'm sure that, because I've been attending planning committee when this has been debated, there's a frustration across all parties on that planning committee, because on one hand, there's all these issues being raised, but on the other hand, council officers are saying to members that they can't make a decision because at that point where they are in the planning process, those things can't be considered. So it's a bit like, well, we can't look at it in planning committee. So the only way for it to be looked at is if it was sent back from this chamber so that the issue around revocation could be debated and all that evidence could come to light. And then obviously, hopefully, make a decision one way or the other. But that's not happened yet, and that's what they can do.
So Councillor Hencock, you're to second.
Yes, I reserve my right to speak on it, Chair.
Councillor Reader.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to make the point that Claycross Parish Council have been behind these residents from day one. We objected to the original application, obviously. I went to the original planning meeting and spoke up for the residents there. So we will be supporting this motion and voting with it. So I hope we can get some movement. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Cupid.
So as Councillor Shipman says, when we discussed this last, I fully appreciate the concerns of local residents, particularly those in and around Windermere Road. We've suffered from the threat of flooding, live in a flood risk area, and have really distressingly suffered flooding issues in the past. Whilst we or new planning applications can't solve those historical issues in this area, the site's allocation or the site's allocation, I understand the concerns and we continue to try and find a way forward with this. Since we last debated it in this chamber, we've had and been part of lots of meetings and conversations, and I know Councillor Shipman has too, to try and find a solution to these concerns. As part of the issues during the recent amendment to a Section 73 application, and discussions on flooding concerns related to this, we did manage to get an amendment or addition in the form of the developer installing an additional water storage tank at their own cost, which will provide extra capacity in this area and on site during periods of heavy rainfall or high water levels. In addition to that, following other issues raised, correspondence with some surrounding residents, understandably, Rowley MP and the County Council have also been working to make some amendments to the brook further downstream. And near the bridge to remove silting, etc., and encourage the water flow onwards rather than backing up near the site. As District Council, we don't have any duties or responsibilities in relation to flooding matters other than the statutory comments and advice of the local flood authority, and to take those on board, as the motion says, who are the experts and responsible parties. However, given the historic experiences in this area and the proximity of existing and new dwellings to the brook, I know residents' concerns remain, and I understand the survey mentioned in the motion could provide clarity for residents in this regard. So I think we should use this debate and this motion to add our voice and position as a council to support residents in pushing for that survey to be done as well. So I'm proposing an amended motion, which I've submitted to Alan Mayor, and I understand he's going to share it round. But the amendments are two parts. Firstly, in relation to the bullet points or points to note, I'm proposing a few amendments to avoid any legal issues or accusations and to focus on the key issues and facts. And secondly, I'm proposing to amend the resolution to urge external parties to find a way to carry out a survey or hydraulic modelling, which would then give planning committee something to review in relation to the site, and referring the matters then without that data in place wouldn't give the members of the committee any new evidence or details on what's a quite technical matter to base their discussion. So I think that, as Councillor Shipman's mentioned, the model or survey is ultimately at the heart of the matter in this, that would determine it for residents and for the committee and for all of us. So I hope this is a good opportunity to unite as a chamber and as council and pass this amended motion and send a strong message and request that we want this modelling to be done. So I'm proposing the amendment, Chair.
I don't know.
I'll take the second then. That was that. So I'll just, can we just pause so that everyone can receive a copy of the amended motion? Unless you're accepting it. Right, then, no,
I've got some questions.
right, and then we'll let everyone have a copy. Then. Almost there. In the moment, we'll be able to turn over your papers. That's it. Everybody got a copy? Right, the amended version has been circulated, so we'll debate the amendment as proposed and seconded. So now on the debate about the amended version. Councillor Shipman.
Thank you, Chair. Although this amendment on the surface looks reasonable, the problem you've got is that word if. Because, as you well know, and I've had discussions with developer, council, NEDC, everybody, no one's going to carry out that survey. Nobody has agreed to carry out that survey. So, basis on the word if that model is then completed, the planning committee is never going to see this. This is going to get kicked into long grass and nothing will happen. What this needs to say is to either this council pays for that survey and then it goes back to committee, to the planning committee, or stick with the original motion. You can't have this where we're relying on this survey, which Council Cupid knows full well is never going to be carried out because NEDC and county are saying the developer needs to do it. The developer's saying we don't need to do it, and therefore the amended motion it will kill off this whole idea because it's never going to happen. And I cannot support this amendment because that's the intention of it. And I'm sure Councillor Cupid knows full well that's the intention of it. And I just think it's ridiculous that we're being told to amend it in this way.
Comments? Councillor Hancock?
Can I speak on this?
Yes, you can.
Yeah. I think actually to highlight, I think in particular the amendment to the last bullet point. Yes, the planning authority isn't the flood authority, but it is actually part of our responsibilities to make sure that new and existing homes don't flood. So that is a requirement of us, and it's a duty that is in the NPPF. Other than that, I agree with Councillor Shipman. That if needs taking, it needs to be when that modelling is completed. And I would, in terms of this amendment, I'd take out that whole first sentence because the modelling needs to be completed and it needs to be referred back. So I couldn't submit this, I couldn't support this amendment as it stands in that context.
Thank you. Councillor Barker?
Yeah, I think I liked all that. When I first looked at it, I thought, well, there's not wrong with that. But having just listened to the argument, I tend to agree what's been said, that I think we can vote on this, obviously, and we'll vote against the amendment, but and also for the, that will come back.
We'll wait and see. Any other comments on the amendment? If not, then back to Councillor Cupid. Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Cupid to reply.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you, Chair. I'm really disappointed, to be honest with you, by the accusation from Councillor Shipman. That wasn't the intention. The whole point of this, as I've just outlined in my speech, is to urge external parties to carry out a survey or model that enables the planning committee to be informed. So I'm not sure on the sort of constitutional legalities of this, Chair, but if it would reassure the opposition members, I'm happy to change that if on the amendment to when, to urge for it to be done. That's the whole point of this.
Thank you, Councillor Shipman. You've had your bite of the cherry. It's your choice.
Is that, can I propose that?
Yep, we'll change the word if in the amendment to when. If that not, so when that, so that's the council resolve section becomes when that modelling is completed. Well, that's the right to reply exercise. So we move to the vote. All those in favour of the amendment, show your hand. All those against? Any abstentions? When the amendment is carried, now becomes the substantive motion before council. So any other comments, questions on the now substantive motion? If not, so we move to vote on the substantive motion. All those, Councillor Shipman.
I am a bit disappointed actually that we're going down this route, because as I've just said, this is, if we don't get that. Like I just said, the fact that we're relying on a survey to be completed by God knows anybody, where there's no funding available, is going to hold this up. Like if that report never comes, this is never going to end up in front of planning. We've already got a part of the survey, or something counted on the levels in the borough, which planning could quite easily look at and make a decision based on that. And I think that if this went back to planning, then at least the council's in a stronger position than it is currently, which is it's got no leg to stand on. It can't force a developer to do anything. It can't make the ECC do anything. And I do fear that we are now just going to kick this into the long grass and nothing's going to move forward. Because if that model don't come, nothing will happen. So reluctantly, I will vote for it because it's better than nothing. But still, it's not going to achieve. I'll honestly, I will bet 100 quid that this does not end up in planning. I'll donate it to Ashgate Hospice. Because I'll tell you now, this will not happen.
Somebody needs to pay £100 if you don't. Thank you,
Council, if you could donate £100 if it does. No, it's all the way around. All the way around.
That's a yes from Councillor Cupid. Right, so it's a win-win. No, thank you, Councillor Shipman. So that's the right to reply exercise. So we'll move to the vote on the now substantive motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? Any abstentions? The motion is carried. So we move to the second motion. This one is from Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Chair. As you say, the motion's in front of you. I don't intend to read it out. I'm sure everyone gets the drift of its intentions. I know some will think it's not the role of district councillors to get involved in national issues, but I'm afraid it is the only avenue that we, as politicians with a big P, get our chance to voice our concerns on things like this. Only today, if you read it, the Local Government Information Unit, one of the articles was out of the Daily Express, no less, stating that food banks are facing an impossible situation. They are struggling to support more and more people unable to afford food, whilst their capacity is reduced due to lack of donations and volunteers. It's bad enough that we need food banks, but when they can't cope, something needs to be done. This motion is not asking for a lot, just for us as an authority to try a bit harder as a council and asking our MPs to ask the government to try a bit harder as well. So hopefully you will support this. Thank you.
Councillor Reader.
I'm going to second the motion. I'm going to hold my rights to reply to the end. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hartshorn.
Thank you, Chair. I think there is some things that this council can do. Well, support our local government with this cost of living crisis, and that will be to reinstate the funding for the Derbyshire Unemployed Workers Centre. It's noted that the phone number for the Unemployed Workers Centre is no longer in our magazine. I think it's very unfair. It is also worth mentioning that even our North East Derbyshire Member of Parliament actually signpost people towards this centre. This council reduced the funding from 20, that was at 22,000 to 10,000, and then they put it all together. This is for so all the outreach we used to do no longer happen. Last year, they brought into this district £1,048,098 worth of support to our constituents. But this council can't fund them. I think this council should reinstate this funding to help those most vulnerable to this cost of living crisis. Thank you,
Councillor Hartshorn. Councillor Hancock.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is a good motion. It's one I support. At parish levels, Tupton Parish Council has been funding a food bank. It's been funding the Derbyshire Unemployed Workers Centre, and it's been funding what a debt and benefit support advisor within the parish itself, so that people don't have to pay this there to go somewhere else. It doesn't take a huge amount of money. Parishes don't have a huge amount of money. So I actually agree with what Councillor Hartshorn said, that there is the potential for the council to do more. This isn't actually putting a huge onus on the district council. I think that the least we could do is to support this and to pass this on amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Shipman.
Thank you, Chair. As we've just heard from Councillor Hartshorn, the Derbyshire Unemployed Workers Association have had theirs reduced by 20 grand, and we've just seen the Conservative group vote to raise the special allowances and salaries by 23. So clearly the issue isn't money, and I think that this is a good motion. It's something I will support, and I think we should be looking at ways to have all these different groups delivering services for us and not be cutting them. They are ultimately getting people back into work. They're supporting people when they're at the most vulnerable. They're stopping people going into debt, which ultimately that cost is passed on to us if it's not dealt with early. And I think that this motion is not asking for too much. It's reasonable, and I think we all should be supporting it. But thank you.
Councillor Dale.
Thank you, Chair. I don't think anyone could argue about the significant financial pressures facing our residents at the moment. That point clearly isn't in question. But there are some issues with the proposed resolutions in this motion. On the issue of fees and charges, the first bullet point, the motion makes no attempt to explain which fees and charges in particular you would want us to review or revise. And I would ask that someone does perhaps make that clear. We have done a sort of desktop exercise and reviewed them in preparation for the motion. And I think the following points I'd like to make are that some are statutory anyway, so they're set by national government. We don't have any leeway over them. A classic example would be planning fees. Many of the discretionary fees and charges that we have in place already have assistance packages built into them. For example, pest control has a 50% discount for anyone on certain income-related benefits. We have leisure discounts and concessions for service users, including those in receipt of pensions and benefits. And generally, fees and charges are set to enable cost recovery, for example, with environmental health, or to contribute to our costs in the case of leisure. To reduce these is only going to impact on the council's own budget. And I distinctly recall only a couple of months ago, opposition councillors expressing concern over the levels of savings still to achieve when we set the budget. And yet these same councillors are now calling for further pressures to be placed on the budget, which could impact on frontline services. And moreover, what the motion fails to recognise is that we too, as an organisation, are facing similar cost pressures as our residents. The latest forecasted impact on our budget from the increase in energy and fuel costs is £660,000 a year. On the issue of welfare advice and debt management, we continue to support the voluntary and community sector organisations who provide this support, like CAB or the Derbyshire Law Centre, to the tune of £130,000 per year. That's been the case for the past many years. I don't know exactly how long, but several years. So the overall allocation of funding that goes to the community and voluntary sector hasn't changed. Councillor Hartshorn is absolutely right to point out that we have made changes in terms of the way which organisations we have distributed the money to. I would highlight that at the same time that the Derbyshire Unemployed Workers Centre no longer receives funding, Citizens Advice Bureau received an extra £10,000 at the time. I've met with Citizens Advice many a time. I think they do fantastic work. They do a lot of duplicated work at the Derbyshire Unemployed Workers Centre, and importantly, they do it on an apolitical basis, which I think is really important. And these groups over the whole have supported 19,000 households last year. We work with loads of different partner organisations like the Healthy North East Derbyshire Partnership, its financial inclusion group, to promote free advice to those who need it. Our housing delivery partners, Ricknold Homes, have a dedicated team who can offer advice and support about money management and welfare benefits to all of our council home tenants. And our own housing options team continue to work with those who become or are at risk of homeless with their referral service. We have prevention through things like the Deposit Guarantee Scheme, and we have close links with the Derbyshire Law Centre and outreach services for rough sleepers. And following on from a government grant through the Household Support Fund, we helped to prevent 75 people becoming homeless over the winter. And there's lots of other ways that we're supporting residents. Things like what we've just heard from Ricknold around the EWI scheme. That's helping to save an average of £286 per household per year for those tenants who have the works done. Obviously, throughout the pandemic, we all know the council pulled out all the stops to support residents in every way we could. Our finance team distributed grants totaling £45 million to struggling businesses across the district. We continue to deliver regular jobs fairs to help local people find local jobs. We also support our own community employment advisors, similar to what Councillor Hancock said, who provides that direct support for people to find work. We've frozen leisure membership fees for 2 years. There's a huge amount that we already do to support residents, and clearly, anyone can make the argument that there's more that can be done, and obviously we'll always continually keep that under review and assess wherever we can do more. We will do more. We very much aim to support our residents, but I can't escape the conclusion, despite what Councillor Barker says, that this is a politically charged motion. I do think there is an intention there, and therefore we'll be voting against it. Having said all of what I've said, and we will continue to do what we can to support our residents.
Any other comments? Councillor Ridgway.
Maya? Yeah, okay, that's fine. Thanks for that, Councillor Dale. My only concern is that, you say, you know, you can't come out with £268 per year saving on heating. That is how much people are now having to pay per month for all their gas and electricity. And we've got people that are working that are on a low income, and that. I think we can do more. My biggest concern is about people that are not going to be able to pay their rent. They're not going to be able to pay their council tax. So we're going to have more evictions coming along. So we're going to have rent poverty. We're going to have council tax poverty. We're going to have food poverty. So I think these are things that we need to really sit down as a council and look at. I mean, I know of somebody that, you know, that they were paying £70 a month for their gas and electricity. They've now been told they've got to pay over £300. And this is somebody that works, but is on a minimum wage. How are they supposed to do that with 2 young children? Do you know what I mean? I disagree. We can do a lot more. And my biggest concern, as I say, is rent and council tax poverty, and also people being evicted. And it's not just council house people that are going to be evicted. It's going to be people that are working, nurses, carers and all that are on a low income and can't afford to pay the council tax and can't afford to pay the food. And I think we need to look at it a lot more as this council.
Barry?
Thank you, Chair. Actually, Councillor Ridgway has just mentioned part of what I was going to say. We always talk about residents that are in our council homes. We never talk about those low-paid workers that own their own homes or that have to private rent. You know, what do we do to help those people? Because this is hitting them as much as it is hitting people in council properties. And we seem to forget those people. You know, I have daughters that work in the NHS. They are not paid a fortune. They work in the community. My youngest daughter's electric bill has just gone up phenomenal. It's gone up by, I think it's £280 a month. She doesn't earn enough to be paying that. So I do think we need, it's not just looking at what's happening with the council tenants, which are, you know, important to us all, but so are those low paid workers that are in their own homes, working hard to keep a roof over their own heads.
Councillor Mark Foster.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've got an awful lot of sympathy for a lot that's been mentioned in this motion, but I can't help feeling like our leader's already said that it is a very political motion. We've mixed up A, B, and C. When you look at A, I'd like to reiterate the request from the leader about the charges, the review of charges and fees, which we do anyway as a council. And I'd like to ask which charges and which fees, and the only ones I could see were the pest control with the 50% discount, those on benefits, the leisure pass and the concession pass, sorry, the leisure pass and concession pass for our leisure services. And that was it. So I'd like to know, and I know, I think Councillor Reid will come in afterwards. I'd like to know which charges you actually mean, because we do give some discounts to those already. When it comes to B, I'm very supportive of Citizens Advice Bureau. Absolutely, I think they do fantastic work. And if it comes to pass next year that there is, I'll stick my neck out and say, perhaps I shouldn't, but if it does come to say that there is an increased promise next year, I would support that. I just think they do excellent work, I really do. Certainly not C, without a shadow of a doubt. And it's a shame that's in. But thanks for that.
I'm back on stage. Right, any others? Councillor Fennell?
Hello. Forgive me, that's fine. I'm actually a trustee with Citizens Advice, so I can talk with some confidence about that. And we are appreciative of the grants that have come from North East. We used to get 75,000, we now get 85,000. The extra 10,000 we are going to use to try and recruit more volunteers to help deliver the service. For people who don't know, Citizens Advice is 50% staffed and 50% volunteers, really. So we're going to use that money to try and get more volunteers to come and help us. and 10K is 2 days a week of somebody coordinating our volunteer recruitment. We are seeing a lot more members of
I think, Councillor Fidel, I'm going to have to stop you. I allowed it, but you should have declared an interest really as a trustee of Citizens Advice, and you're now going into a catalogue of how you're going to spend the money. So I am going to stop. I'm going to stop you there.
Okay, I didn't realise that.
You got a lot in though, so well done. Anything else? Come back to you, Councillor Reader, to exercise your right of reply.
Thank you, Chair. Just remove my last. It is disappointing if you can't support it. I don't think the motion is asking for too much, really, in terms of this. When it says fees, I think it means generally all the fees that the council exercises on our residents, can it be reviewed and looked at, and can we support as much as possible? The Cabinet are in the position to be able to do that. So generally, all our fees that affect all of our residents, can we do as much as we possibly can to support them? I absolutely agree with Councillor Barry. This is extending not just to council residents, it's all residents across all of our district that are facing really hard and tough times. And we've got to remember that there are real people at the end of everything that they do. And I was wanting to be a councillor to support those people. So this motion's been brought with that in mind, that we want to try and support our residents that are coming to us, calling us every day with their struggles. And I don't believe that this does any harm in showing that we do support them. In terms of point C, I absolutely want that to stay in. As Councillor Barker said, we're not national politicians in this room, but there are councillors in this room that have positions where they can influence those people more than others that are in government and can go and lobby and make those decisions. So I absolutely want that point to stay in this motion. We all know across North East Derbyshire, there are families that are really struggling, and we all know that children born into families with poverty will experience worse outcomes if they're living in a household that is struggling with poverty. And we'll go round and round again. So this motion isn't asking for too much, it's just asking for every bit that we can do to try and make life a little bit easier for those people in North East Derbyshire. So I absolutely stand with this motion. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Barker, your right to reply.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just political. I admitted that in my preamble. This is the only chance we get as local politicians, whether we like the term or not, that's what we are. And this is the chance that we get to represent these concerns at a meeting like this. So yeah, it is political. And I know in our group, everybody in our group meeting were concerned about this, but because they know people that it's affected. And this is why we brought it. And like Tracy says, Councillor Reader, that there are people in this room that know people personally that can try and go back to government and express those concerns. That's what we're doing in this room. We're trying to get across the concerns that we've got, that you can then feed back to the people can make a difference. I accept we do a lot at North East Derbyshire. There's a lot of good work goes on, you know, all the help we give people, either through written or through other things. But don't mean we can't have another look at some of the things. Whether we take away the refuse collection, you know, picking up stuff, and for a couple of years we don't charge for that, or for the pest control. We could take that away, and I know it impacts on something else because that's always the case. But that's where we are, and it is. We're at a bad stage at the moment. People are not feeling it yet fully because the gas and electric bills have not started dropping on letterbox. So it's going to be really, really bad. And that's what we're asking for. And the most important bit to this is C. And so we can actually influence central government to do more. We can do what we can, and it's only on the fringes. What can happen is if government can start reducing people's bills and tackling the energy companies and all that sort of stuff. We can't do that. Central government can do that, and that's what we're asking for in that C. So, and again, there's the issue around Dowes and Employed Workers and there's politics in that. I accept that, but they do a good job, as does the Citizens Advice and the Law Centre. But I've made my point. It's there in front of you. We know what the result's going to be, but I think you should reconsider that and have a good think and vote in favour of that. Thank you.
So we come now to the vote. So all those in favour of the motion, please show your hands. All those against? Any abstentions? The motion has been lost. Item 15, there are no urgent business items from myself, so can I thank you for your attendance and declare the meeting closed.